What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. The fight gloves are on. UFC 156 goes down this Saturday night on pay-per-view, headlined by a featherweight title fight between Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar. We got the return of Rashad Evans. We got the return of Alistair Overeem. It's a big card. Let's get to the predictions. We're going to start on the undercard in the bantamweight division. We have Edwin Figueroa taking on Francisco Rivera. Edwin Figueroa 9-1 on his pro career, a winning record of 2-1 inside the octagon. He decisioned Bruce Leroy Alex Caceres in his last fight. 6 of Figueroa's 9 pro wins have come by way of knockout, and after Figueroa suffered his first career loss in the fight with Michael McDonald, I feel like his last couple of fights he's come back really well. Francisco Rivera 8-2-1 on his pro career. He is 1-1-1 inside the UFC. Now, he had a TKO win against Roland Delorme in his last fight, which was overturned by failing his post-fight drug test. 5 of his 8 pro wins have come also by way of knockout, and he is 3-1-1 since making the move from featherweight down to bantamweight. And 2 very similar fighters here. Really, I just got to go sort of on gut instinct, and I think my gut instinct is telling me to go with Figueroa. I think Figueroa has faced slightly higher caliber of competition than has Rivera, so I think I'm going to give a slight edge here to Figueroa. I'm going to take Edwin Figueroa to beat Francisco Rivera by way of unanimous judges' decision. Sticking with the bantamweights now, we have Chico Camas taking on Dustin Kimura. Chico Camas 12-3 on his pro career, 1-0 in the octagon, currently riding a 4-decision win streak, including his decision over Dustin Paige in his UFC debut. Now, 7 of his 12 pro wins have been finishes. Those finishes have all come in rural promotions. 2 of his 3 losses have come by way of decision. Now, Dustin Kimura, undefeated, 9-0 on his pro career, making his UFC debut, currently riding a 5-fight finish win streak. 8 of his 9 pro wins have been finishes, 2 knockouts, 6 submissions, and he trains at Gracie Technics with Max Blessed Holloway, so he's got at least one real good training partner there. This was actually a really tough one because Chico Camas clearly has the experience edge. He's got his going to be his second fight in the UFC. In his first fight in the UFC, he didn't exactly look all that out of place. So you give the experience edge in a big way to Chico Camas. Again, I just kind of got a gut feeling about Dustin Kimura. I don't know really what it is. I haven't watched all of his fights, but he's really impressed me in the fights that I've seen him in. So this may be an upset, but I'm going to take him. I'm going to take Dustin Kimura to beat Chico Camas by way of unanimous judges' decision. Moving to the lightweight division, we have Yves Edwards taking on Isaac Vallie-Flagg. Yves Edwards, 42-18-1 on his professional career, 10-6 in the UFC, coming off of a knockout victory over Jeremy Stephens in his last fight. Now, Yves Edwards has a finisher's pedigree. He has finished 33 of his 42 professional wins, but he's only 9-10 when the fight goes the distance. So the fight goes all 3 rounds, really only a 50-50 shot there that Yves Edwards is going to come out on top. Isaac Vallie-Flagg, 13-3-1 on his pro career, making his UFC debut. Currently riding a 2-decision win streak over JZ Cavalcante and Brian Melancone in Strikeforce. And he's also unbeaten in his last 11 fights, so he's definitely on a roll, this being Vallie-Flagg, but again, the competition, the quality of competition is pretty debatable in there. I like Yves Edwards. I didn't go with Yves Edwards in the Jeremy Stephens fight. I thought Jeremy Stephens could handle him. Turns out that wasn't the case. Jeremy Stephens got his ass knocked out. And I think Vallie-Flagg's going to get his ass knocked out too. So I'm going to go with Thug Jitsu, Yves Edwards, to defeat Isaac Vallie-Flagg by way of knockout or technical knockout inside the very first round. Sticking with the lightweights, we have Jacob Volkman taking on Bobby Green. Jacob Volkman, 15-3 on his pro career, a good record of 6-3 in the octagon, submitting Shane Roller in his last fight. Volkman, really no knockout power to speak of, but he's got 7 submission victories, his other 8 victories coming by way of decision. He's a Div 1 wrestler from Minnesota, and the reason that I state where he's from is, to me, there's a difference between being a Div 1 wrestler and being a Div 1 wrestler in Minnesota. The whole wrestling world is in Minnesota, you know what I mean? So being a Div 1 wrestler from Minnesota, I think, says even more than just saying, well, he's a Div 1 wrestler. Bobby Green, 19-5 in his pro career, making his UFC debut. 2 straight decisions in Strikeforce against Matt Ricehouse and James Terry, but 15 of his 19 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 7 knockouts and 8 submissions. Bobby Green's a dangerous fighter. That being said, UFC debut, the big possibility there for octagon jitters. It doesn't always happen, but it does happen very frequently. And again, you look at the caliber of opponent for Bobby Green, not exactly impressive. Got to go with Jacob Volkman. He's the demon you know versus the demon you really don't. Jacob Volkman to defeat Bobby Green by way of first round submission. Sticking with the welterweights, Tyron Woodley taking on Jay Heron, returning to the UFC for, I believe, the 4th time. Tyron Woodley, 10-1 on his pro career, making his UFC debut. He is 4-0 when the fight goes the distance. He is a Div 1 wrestler and a BJJ purple belt, so his grappling really on point. Trains at American Top Team, and he was a long-time welterweight contender in Strikeforce. Jay Heron, 23-6 in his pro career, 0-3 in his 3 trips to the UFC, was decisioned in his last fight by Jake Ellenberger. 10-3 when the fight goes the distance to a decision. He's a Div 1 wrestler, really Div 1 wrestle boxer, I'll say that. But what I will say about Jay Heron, got very, very good chokes. And this was a tough fight to predict because if Tyron Woodley doesn't gas out, I think it's going to be Woodley all day. But if he does gas out, Heron's going to be able to not only beat him, but finish this fight. Very close for me. I had to stick with Tyron Woodley. I want to see if Woodley's going to be able to do it in the UFC, taking on a guy that's lost 3 times in the UFC without picking up a win. So I had to go with Tyron Woodley. Going to take Woodley to beat Jay Heron by way of unanimous judges' decision. And the final fight on the prelim card in the lightweight division, we have Gleason Tebow taking on Evan Dunham. Now, Gleason Tebow, 26-8 on his pro career, 11-6 in the UFC, picking up a decision win over Francisco Trinaldo in his last fight. Tebow is a BJJ black belt, very solid wrestling, very good hands, so he's a well-rounded kind of dude, really been working on his boxing and his striking. Tebow is, of course, a southpaw, which is difficult to handle, unless your opponent is a southpaw, which Evan Dunham is. Evan Dunham, 13-3 on his pro career, 6-3 in the UFC, so very good record as well. Was decisioned in his last fight by TJ Grant. Now, 9 of his 13 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 3 knockouts and 6 submissions. What I love about Evan Dunham is he's a very consistent fighter. He's a BJJ black belt. He's 4-2 when the fight goes to decision, but you usually always know what you're going to get out of a fighter like Evan Dunham. He doesn't really have these peaks and valleys. He's a very, very consistent fighter. What I really looked at in this fight is Evan Dunham going to be able to get Gleason Tebow down to really make use of that good top game that he has and the good offensive and defensive grappling? And with Tebow's takedown defense, just some of the best in MMA, I don't know that Evan Dunham's going to be able to take him down, especially where Tebow's going to have such a size advantage. Head and shoulders the biggest lightweight in the division. I think I have to go with Tebow, just based on the fact that I don't think Dunham's going to be able to get him down, and in that case, it comes down to a striking battle, and I don't know that Evan Dunham wants to stand with Tebow's power, so I'm going to take Gleason Tebow to beat Evan Dunham by way of unanimous judges' decision. I know I'm picking a lot of decisions, but remember, it's the UFC. Up to the main card now. In the flyweight division, we have Joseph Benavidez taking on Ian McCall. This is likely a title eliminator, the winner of this fight, likely to get the next title shot. Joseph Benavidez, 16-3 on his pro career. He is 3-1 in the UFC. Was decisioned in his last fight by the flyweight champion Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson in that title fight. Of course, we mentioned it before, team alpha male fighter, chokes for days. 8 of his 16 pro wins are submissions. I really like Joseph Benavidez. I honestly thought Benavidez was going to beat Johnson in their fight. Didn't end up working out. Ian McCall, Uncle Creepy, 11-3-1 on his pro career. 0-1-1 in the UFC, decision in his last fight by Demetrius Johnson. So Demetrius Johnson has beaten both of these guys. 4-2 when the fight goes the distance. 7 of his 11 pro wins have been finishes, 4 knockouts, 3 submissions, and he is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Really, this comes down to which one of these two fighters do I like better and who I think has the superior skill set. And I have to go Benavidez. I honestly think Benavidez is the guy that's going to have at least the better chance of beating Demetrius Johnson. So I'm going to go with Joseph Benavidez to get his title rematch, defeating Ian McCall by way of, you guessed it, unanimous judges' decision. Welterweight division, John Fitch taking on Demian Maia in a fight that I've actually wanted to see for a little while, so I'm really, really excited to see it. John Fitch, 24-4-1-1 on his pro career, 14-2-1 in the UFC, an excellent UFC record, decisioning Eric Silva in his last fight. And in that fight with Eric Silva, he just had a much improved and a lot more impressive performance than we're used to seeing from Fitch. Yes, it was a lot of dominant top control, but he was very busy. It was more exciting. It was gritty. He came back from adversity because Silva had him in a couple of tough spots there early on. I hate to say it, John Fitch impressed me in his last fight, so what are you going to do? Demian Maia, 17-4 on his pro career, 11-4 in the UFC, submitting Rick Story in his last fight. And Demian Maia has looked dominant since the move down to welterweight. It was absolutely the right move for him. I believe he's 2-0 now at welterweight and has just looked really, really good in those two fights. A fourth-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I think what this comes down to for me is Fitch's window is closing, but at the same time, Maia has been so dominant at this weight class. I think I have to see Maia fall off the tracks before I can stop betting with him. So I'm going to have to go Demian Maia in this fight. It's an upset. I understand that, and you should understand that as well. But Demian Maia, I'm picking to defeat John Fitch by way of, you guessed it, unanimous judges' decision. Let's go to the big boys now. Heavyweight, Alistair Overeem taking on Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Overeem, 36-11-1 on his pro career, winning his only octagon fight, TKOing Brock Lesnar. Now, of course, it's his first fight in over a year based on his failed drug test, but Overeem riding a 12-fight winning streak and is one of the elite heavyweights in mixed martial arts. We look at Bigfoot Silva, 17-4 in his pro career, 1-1 in the UFC, knocked out Travis Hoffa Brown in his last fight. 12 of his 7 pro wins have come by way of knockout. 3 of his 4 losses have also been by knockout. Bigfoot Silva's going to come into this fight with a 2-inch reach advantage, which could very well come into play because we figure Overeem's going to want to keep this fight standing. And Silva just very well-rounded. We talked about it in the last video that featured him, and he's dangerous wherever the fight goes. How can you not bet with Reem? Reem, I think, just has the superior body of work, despite the fact that Bigfoot Silva has beaten Fedor. I just think Silva's doesn't have the body of work that Overeem has. Gonna go with Overeem to beat Bigfoot Silva by way of second round knockout or TKO. Co-main event in the light heavyweight division, we have Rashad Evans making his return to the octagon, his first fight in 10 months, taking on Antonio Rogerio Minotauro Nogueira. Rashad Evans, 17-2-1 on his pro career. He is 12-2-1 in the UFC. Fantastic record. Was decisioned in his last fight by John Bones Jones. Now, of course, we mentioned his first fight in 10 months. And Rashad Evans, we all know the book on Rashad Evans. His only finish since 2008 was Tito Ortiz. So take that for what it is. And he's 9-1 when the fight goes the distance. Now, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, 20-5 in his pro career, TKO'd Tito Ortiz in his last fight. Third-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very, very crisp boxing, and he's got great grappling too. So, and again, his only finish since 2009 was also Tito Ortiz. So, I think we all know where this is going. We know this fight's going to go to a decision. I don't think either one of these guys is going to finish the other, but I got to take Rashad Evans. I mean, Rashad just suffocating wrestling, and I think that's what it's going to end up being. So Rashad Evans, I'm predicting to beat Antonio Rogerio Nogueira by way of unanimous judges' decision. That takes us to our main event fight of the evening. For the featherweight title, Jose Aldo, the best featherweight fighter in the world, taking on Frankie Edgar. Now, Jose Aldo, 21-1 on his pro career, undefeated 3-0 record in the UFC. He knocked out Chad Mendes in his last title defense. 14-fight win streak for Jose Aldo. 13 of his 21 pro wins have been knockouts. He is a BJJ black belt. He trains at the Nova União camp, one of the best camps in MMA, one of the most underrated camps in MMA. The book is out on Jose Aldo. The book has been written. He's one of the greatest fighters, pound for pound, in the entire world. Now we look at Frankie Edgar, 14-3-1 on his pro career, a winning record of 9-3-1 in the UFC. Currently riding a 2-decision losing streak, both of those decisions coming at the hands of Ben Smooth Henderson. This is Edgar's 7th straight title fight in his 2nd division, and he is 8-3 when the fight goes the distance. I do not expect this fight to go the distance. It is a 5-round fight because it is a title fight. I'm expecting Jose Aldo to, again, go in there and do what Jose Aldo does and retain that title. This is Frankie Edgar's first fight at this new weight class, and whether you think it's the right weight class for him or you don't, it's still the first time that he's had to do the weight cut. And I know the fighters, it's a real trendy thing right now to say, like, oh, it was easier for me to get to 145 than it was for me to get to 155. It's a real trendy thing for fighters to be saying now. The weight cut is, I believe, going to affect him. Yes, he's going to be a little faster, but I just don't think he's going to be on Jose Aldo's level. So Jose Aldo to defeat Frankie Edgar by 4th round knockout or TKO. Those are the fight picks, kids. I'm going to go over them here with you one more time. We're going to start on the undercard. I have Edwin Figueroa at bantamweight to decision Francisco Rivera. I have Dustin Kimura also at bantamweight to decision Chico Camus. At lightweight, I have Yves Edwards to knockout or TKO Isaac Vallie-Flagg in the 1st round. Also at lightweight, I have Jacob Volkman to submit Bobby Green in the 1st round. At welterweight, I have Tyron Woodley to decision Jay Huron. And back at lightweight, I have Gleason Tebow to decision Evan Dunham. In the flyweight division, I have Joseph Benavidez to decision Ian McCall. At welterweight, I have Demian Maia with an upset decision win over John Fitch. The big boys, the heavyweights, I have Alistair Overeem to knockout or TKO Antonio Bigfoot Silva in the 2nd round. At light heavyweight, I have Rashad Evans to decision Minotauro Nogueira. And in the main event, the featherweight title, I have Jose Aldo to defend the featherweight title, defeating Frankie Edgar by 4th round knockout or TKO. Those are my fight picks. I want to hear your fight picks in the comment section below. Now, once football season is over and once I get my awards out of the way, I promise you I'm going to be getting these UFC videos up earlier for you. I understand the last couple have come out like the day before the event. So I'm going to try to get these up earlier for you in the future. Just kind of a hectic time of year right now, but we're going to try to do that for you. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, UFC 156. Going to be a great card. Enjoy the fights.